to your Chicago Bears, Colin. And I guess there's some consternation in Chicago that maybe Bears fans are like, when are we going to do something? We're going to get a big guy. You got Cowherd out here talking about Max Crosby. We didn't get him. I know we lost DJ Moore. We lost our center. And Chicago, I don't know, Colin. I'm looking at their moves. Khalif Raymond is a fine get. But you look at their wide receiver depth, it's not great after Odunze
the Chicago Bears are talented enough today to win a Super Bowl. Not saying they should be favored. Remember, you may not play the best teams. They get upset. If you look at their roster, Devin Bush, Gallimore, Jedrick Willis, they also have picks. They've drafted pretty well. Their talent is good enough. Drew Dolman is a loss, but picking up Garrett Bradbury is about as well as you could do considering the situation. There's 7 or 8 rosters in this league that are good enough to win the Super Bowl. Rams, Seahawks, Lions, Eagles, Bears, Buffalo is close. Chargers, Denver. There's about 7, 8 that you need breaks, but I think the Bears fall into that. They've got enough weapons. They've O-line, quarterback, coach. They need an edge rusher. You get that in the draft. So I think they're fine.
So it's interesting. They got the 25th pick. Obviously, the defense was not great all season. And Colin, how often do you say, hey, you got the quarterback on the rookie deal, spend, spend, spend?
Well, they did. They went and got B players. They didn't take one big swing.
You really think Gallimore's a B player and Devin Bush? I don't know, man. Pro Football Focus, the analytics for those guys it's not great. Kobe Bryant is probably their best defensive move, but does he shore up what was a weak link in the defensive secondary?
Well, my guess is their first pick is a corner because the end of the first round's got 3 or 4 really good corners. So they go get him from the Seahawks, then they get their first pick's a corner, and suddenly now they've only got one real need, and that is an edge rusher.
The Chicago Bears invested significant capital in free agency last season, which creates an important context for understanding their current approach. You cannot simply allocate massive resources every single year without consequences. Contract structures, salary cap mechanics, and roster construction principles all dictate that spending must be strategic rather than impulsive. If continuous splash signings were feasible, every franchise would adopt that model. Every team would treat free agency as an unlimited buffet, acquiring the most desirable talent available without regard for long-term implications. That is fundamentally not how the system operates. Salary cap management presents unique challenges because everything operates on staggered timelines. A team might commit substantial funds in one off-season, only to find flexibility constrained the following year due to those very commitments. Contracts rarely align neatly. The entire structure resembles attempting to navigate multiple staircases simultaneously, each with irregular steps, some ascending while others descend, with random elevators and escalators interspersed throughout. The complexity becomes dizzying. Front offices employ sophisticated analysts specifically to untangle these webs. What strikes me most about this free agency period is the dramatic shift in public discourse. Going into the 2024 season, a prominent narrative emerged de-emphasizing free agency spending. Teams that allocated heavily were frequently mocked or dismissed. There was this prevailing statistical argument, often highlighted by certain media personalities, that the biggest spenders rarely even reached the Super Bowl. Those numbers were cited repeatedly as evidence that throwing money at problems represented fool's gold. That conversation dominated off-season analysis. Fast forward to this season, and that perspective has vanished entirely. Now the discourse demands spending at every opportunity. If your franchise isn't aggressively pursuing free agents, you're somehow falling behind. The expectation has flipped completely. Teams must spend maximum dollars, execute bold trades, make headlines constantly, or risk being labeled as stagnant or regressing. The absence of countervailing voices is remarkable. Where are the warnings about cap implications? Where are the reminders that spending sprees rarely guarantee championships? They have disappeared from the conversation entirely. This brings me to the specific situation in Chicago. Questions about offensive line depth are legitimate and warrant discussion. However, concerns about offensive skill positions seem misplaced. The Bears have addressed receiver comprehensively. Tight end looks solid. Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams have more than enough weaponry to work with. That area should not be considered problematic. Defensively, I find myself appreciating measured approaches to spending. Significant investment in defense is not inherently problematic, but concentrating massive resources on a few defensive players gives me pause. My philosophical preference leans heavily toward drafting young defensive talent. The younger, the better in most cases. Defensive players integrate into schemes more smoothly than offensive skill positions, where experience often carries greater weight. Additionally, defensive players endure constant physical punishment. The attrition rate is substantial. Younger bodies recover more effectively from the inevitable bumps and bruises accumulated throughout a season. Depth becomes crucial when players inevitably miss time. Strategic roster construction acknowledges these realities. That said, I recognize these principles are not immutable laws. The NFL evolves constantly, and strategies must adapt accordingly. My general inclination favors relying primarily on the draft while supplementing through selective free agent acquisitions and opportunistic trades. You build the core through drafting, then round out the roster with smart complementary moves. Blanket rules rarely apply universally because circumstances vary dramatically between organizations. Consider the Los Angeles Rams as a counterexample. Given their specific roster construction and competitive timeline, aggressive spending and draft capital deployment makes perfect sense. Matthew Stafford's age and championship window create urgency that justifies mortgaging future flexibility. Their approach fits their unique situation. That model cannot simply be copied and pasted onto the Bears' circumstances. Chicago faces different constraints and opportunities. The Bears cannot unload draft capital indiscriminately or overload current spending without considering the future. They must preserve flexibility for when Caleb Williams commands his inevitable extension. Everything operates on staggered timelines. It is not as though all financial obligations begin simultaneously and conclude neatly after 3 years. Contracts overlap. Salary cap hits fluctuate. The most critical periods for draft capital vary depending on your roster cycle. The Dallas Cowboys learned these lessons painfully as they navigated paying Dak Prescott, then CeeDee Lamb, then Micah Parsons in succession. Determining optimal staggering requires sophisticated planning. This brings me to a point that seems lost in some critiques. The idea that the Bears have failed to make splash signings while Caleb Williams remains on his rookie contract misunderstands basic cap mechanics. Yes, rookie quarterback contracts create flexibility, but that flexibility must be distributed strategically across multiple needs. Some resources go to free agents. Some go to re-signing existing players. Some might be preserved for future flexibility. It is not simply a matter of having available funds and spending them immediately. Furthermore, contracts signed today will absolutely overlap with Williams' eventual extension. A hypothetical 4-year, $100 million deal for a free agent signed this offseason would carry cap hits in years when Williams commands elite quarterback money. That matters. Every dollar allocated now affects future flexibility. These are not isolated decisions, but interconnected elements of a multi-year strategy. The complexity of NFL salary management cannot be overstated. This is genuinely a multi-million-dollar industry unto itself. Some of the brightest minds in professional sports dedicate themselves to deciphering these puzzles. It explains why certain organizations consistently excel while others struggle. It explains why fans and media members alike find themselves perpetually confused. These are not simple arithmetic problems, where available cap space divided by desired acquisitions yields obvious answers. It is not like walking into a grocery store with $50 and knowing you can purchase a little bit of everything. Contract structures, guaranteed money, bonus allocations, cap hits, dead money, and countless other variables create layers of complexity that resist simplistic analysis. The Bears essentially executed their major spending last season. They committed significant resources that continue affecting their cap picture. This season represents a different phase of their roster-building cycle. Conversations suggesting otherwise strike me as much ado about relatively little. Colin recently suggested the Bears have sufficient talent to win a Super Bowl. I do not disagree with that assessment. The path to contention exists. It requires Caleb Williams taking the anticipated developmental step forward. It requires defensive draft picks contributing immediately as quality additions rather than projects. It requires Ben Johnson validating his reputation as an elite offensive mind. If those elements align, Chicago absolutely positions itself as a legitimate contender. The foundation exists. The question is whether the pieces will coalesce. So no, I am not frustrated by Chicago's relative restraint this free agency period. They addressed major needs previously. They operate within a coherent long-term framework. They preserve flexibility for future necessities. The roster construction follows logical principles rather than impulsive reactions to media pressure. Those represent my thoughts on the Bears and their off-season approach. I am genuinely curious about your perspectives. Are you concerned about their limited free agent activity? Do you view this as prudent management or missed opportunity? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single response, whether agreement or disagreement drives your perspective. Let's generate meaningful discussion, perhaps even productive disagreement, while maintaining enjoyment in the conversation. Please consider subscribing if you appreciate this content. We are developing a community that I hope feels genuinely connected and invested. Your participation matters enormously. Remember to like this video as it supports visibility and algorithmic reach. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next discussion.